It is October 9th, and I'm here with Joshua Lindsey from North Dakota or Minnesota.
Yeah, both. I mean, I go to work in North Dakota, but live in Minnesota. So right on the border there.
Great. Well, Joshua, I usually just read a bio, but I couldn't find like a succinct bio of yours online.
Sure.
So I'm just going to let you give us your like a 5 minute who you are, where you come from, some of your passions, just so people know who you are.
I mean, I should probably do that at some point, is do a better bio. One of the reasons why you might not have even found that is because my channel, Ready to Harvest, which I'll talk about, is from neutral point of view. So I try not generally on my own stuff to talk too much about myself, because I'm just the person who's providing the information. But to give a little bit more information about who I am, I was born in Washington State. We'll go all the way back there. And actually been around quite a bit, mostly in the Midwest since then. But I came in 2011 to Fargo, North Dakota to go to Bible college. And then after going to Bible college there in 2015, I actually came on staff at Masters Baptist College in Fargo, North Dakota. And I teach some classes there. I am also the station manager of the Christian radio station there, having 88.7 radio. And then also do IT work for the church and for the college. And one of the things I was asked to do is to teach a 1 week class on Christian denominations. And so in doing that, I decided to make some videos, and that's really what set things off. I put them online, and that led to where I am today, making videos about Christian denominations on YouTube is really one of the primary things that I do. And when I think about like what people think of me, obviously the people that I'm closest to think of me as, the guy that's at church, but most of the world knows me from YouTube and Christian denominations.
Okay. And you mentioned Ready to Harvest. And can you just tell me a little bit about Ready to Harvest and what that is? I know there's a website, but there's also a YouTube channel, and just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, primarily a YouTube channel. I did make a website where if people want to support the channel, they can go there and watch the videos without ads. And also my videos are, I do make transcripts. So all my videos are scripted. I make transcripts with footnotes and stuff, and I put that on the website. But where almost everybody is running into me is on YouTube. And there I make YouTube videos on Christian denominations. Some of my videos are just on one Christian denomination. That's kind of one of the big things that I enjoy working on, is studying a particular denomination, like the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod or Anglican Church in North America, and doing it from neutral point of view. So my goal is, when all is said and done, if somebody watches the video from that denomination, they'll say that video represents them fairly and that they like it and could even recommend it. In fact, for one denomination, I remember a pastor saying like, "Oh, this is a really good overview of our denomination. I'm going to use this video when I bring on new staff, like to show them what we're about." And so that's my idea for everything, is to do it neutrally. About every other week, I make a video on one denomination, and then the other video on the alternating week will be anything else. So maybe comparing two denominations. I've made some videos that are like quiz videos on denominations, or talking about something happening in real time. So I made several videos over the last few years when the United Methodist Church was splitting into, the UMC, and a lot of groups were leaving, and many of them ended going into the Global Methodist Church. So I covered that issue primarily. So there's some aspect of like denomination news that I'll cover every once in a while. But it's an endless stream of material. There's just a lot to talk about. And honestly, not, at least at the level of granularity that I go into, there's not really anybody else who's doing the same thing. There's people who make videos just on, what do Lutherans believe? But to go into, okay, what's the difference between the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and North American Lutheran Church and that kind of thing, most people aren't going to that level of detail. So I feel like it's providing something that really just hasn't existed. I've always thought, when I make videos, like my core audience is probably ministers or people who are involved in some way, in actually running into multiple denominations. I don't know that that's actually the reality. Like, a lot of people just seem to be people who just find this topic interesting, and maybe they've attended a couple different churches in their life. But I do think, like, if I was somebody who was trying to minister in a city and my city had 10 other churches, where would I go to try to be like, okay, so what else is around here? What do they believe? And I've thought, like, I'm going to try to be that resource where they can find out about all the churches in the area. And so far, it seems to be working. The biggest complaint anybody would have is that it can only go so fast.
Right.
You know, there's been people who've been asking, can you make a video on this group for 3-4 years? And this, I'm making videos every week, but I can only do so much. But that's good. I have a lot of opportunity in the future to continue to do the same thing.
And then, so how do you do your research for your videos? Is it primarily internet based? Do you do any live interviews, any church visits?
It is primarily internet based. I am almost always looking for entirely primary sources. So I don't want to, I don't use the handbook of Christian denominations, things like that exist. Because also denominations can change sometimes pretty quickly. That kind of stuff can get out of date. So first place I'll go is see, do they have a statement of faith or do they have confessions that they hold to? And I'll read through all of those. And I have a certain set of things that I'm looking to find out what they believe about. In my research, I'll often discover some other areas that I don't look into for every denomination, some things that really make them stand out. But then if I find after reading the statement of faith, there's nothing, I can't find out what they believe about tithing or divorce and remarriage or something, then I'll start digging further. Sometimes I've had to purchase ebooks or actual physical books in some cases and wait for those to arrive in the mail and then read through those. I never used to like ebooks. I used to always just read everything on physical books, but I have come around, like an ebook, you can, copy and paste things if they're good and to be able to quote stuff.
I'm a huge fan of ebooks.
Yeah. It took me a little while, but I've come around. So I do ebooks. But some denominations actually have put out apps, and you subscribe to the app. So I did that recently, where I had to pay for a monthly subscription to the app and was able to get information and research there. I've often ended up reading through, or at least skimming through, the tables of contents of several years or decades worth of a denomination's magazine to see okay, if they don't have it in their statement of faith, maybe somebody brought it up in their magazine. So I'll read through all of those. Some denominations have lists of resolutions that they've had at conferences over the years. And so I'll read through the list of resolutions. And whatever I can, I'll do targeted Google searches on their website. If I still can't find it, I'll look up local church congregations within the denomination and find a whole list of those, and then do a targeted Google search for certain words on all of their websites to see if they've ever discussed the issue. So it can be kind of complex, but it's kind of fun too. It's like sleuthing. So.
And do you do, when you shop a video or you ship out a video, do you do all the editing and everything?
Yeah. It is a one man thing. Yeah. Nobody else touches my videos at all before I release them. So it is a process. Right. I start by studying them, and often I'll do the research. I'll make the video, I'll get the script done, and then I won't touch that for a month. I'll research another denomination, and then I'll have that script is done, and then I won't touch that for a while. And then once I've made several that way, then I'll go back and start making graphics for the video. So I have the script, I'll make the graph, and while I'm making the graphics, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I need to fix this. Right. One of the things that's interesting is because I do that, I make the video, a lot of research, really learning. When I'm making the graphics, I'm reading the whole video again. So I'm putting in my own mind to remember it. Then I record the video. I'm saying the video. So that's the third time getting up the information myself.
Like a teleprompter or just
I do. I have I don't like scrolling text like most traditional teleprompter ideas are, but I do have a screen that is next to my camera, and then it's actually like a Word doc set to read mode, and I just tap on the keyboard and it'll advance one page, like a small page of text. So then after that, though, after making the graphics and then recording, finally is the editing. Well, not even finally, the editing. The whole video has to be edited, so I hear it again. And then when it's done, I always, and this is a recommendation for anybody who makes content online, when you're done editing, always watch the video again. Watch it yourself
before you get it out.
Things will be messed up. There'll be problems. There'll be a blank screen for a while. And sometimes this stuff even makes it through after I've watched it. But I'll always watch the video. So I end up however long the video is, I've seen it 5 times by the time it's out there, on top of all the research it took to make it. So yeah, that does take a lot of time to do all that.
And were you going to get at that sometimes you change what you said throughout that process by the end, you catch something?
Occasionally, there's been a few times, you get to the point where, I've already made the video, I've uploaded it, I've scheduled it, but I haven't released it yet. And then, I just encounter something that I realize, oh, I didn't say that right. Or oh, I should have mentioned this instead. I had a video I made on Christian denominations that observe Seventh-day Sabbath. and I had a comparison video with 7 denominations. And then I made another video, and it was another group that did it. The whole video was never intending to be comprehensive of every group that does, but I was like, boy, I should really put this other group in there too.
Right.
So I just, redesigned the whole thing and added another group in there, and that took a lot of time. I can't do that frequently because it takes so much time to redo something, but I thought, I really ought to do that. But at least at the graphics making stage of things, that's where I opted and say, oh, I need to adjust this a little bit. So there is some editing after the fact that goes into everything.
And then I'm just going to ask some trivia. What are some of your most popular videos that you've made?
Sure. My most popular video, I think, right now is called Eastern Christianity versus Western Christianity, which is something I thought, I remember searching on YouTube. I was like, people talk about this a lot. Is there a video like this? And I don't think there was another video by that title at the time. And there's always been people, especially people who are Catholic versus Orthodox. That's always been something that people are interested in. So Eastern Christianity versus Western Christianity takes at least that, but also adds to it the question of Protestantism, and then a few other interesting things like Eastern Protestants and Western Orthodox and such, and describes that whole issue. Obviously the thumbnail and the title is a big thing to any video becoming especially popular, but it also has to be a topic that has broad appeal. Like somebody might say, well, if you become a really good YouTuber, you can make any video go viral. And you can, as long as you're willing to only make the content that will go viral. But I don't want to do that. So like if I make a video, I have one that will be coming out eventually on, Christ Sanctified Holy Church. And my video is, what is Christ Sanctified Holy Church? That video is not going to go viral. Most people don't know, they don't care, and that I'm okay with that. Like I wanted to study, I wanted to learn it for myself, give information on a group that really nobody's talking about. But every once in a while, because I've learned about these very precise things about Christian denominations, now I can make a really good informational, broader topic video on something that maybe a lot of people will click through. And I can give a lot of that information I've learned from these little groups and make those videos interesting, which makes people watch longer. If people watch longer, then YouTube continues to recommend it. Because it doesn't matter ultimately if you click on a video. If you click away, YouTube will stop recommending if people aren't watching it. Because then they say, oh, you could put whatever title and thumbnail on the video could just be junk. And YouTube doesn't want its viewers to go away that fast. So only if people watch the video a significant time will YouTube continue to recommend it. And that one video on Eastern Christianity versus Western is the top one. One of my videos on the United Methodist split, is also maybe number 2 up there. I had a video that's Lutherans, Baptists. It's comparing Lutherans, Baptists, Methodists. I forget exactly all. There's like 4 groups, and just a straight up comparison of 4, which is pretty unusual. Again, there's not a lot of like that on YouTube, and that one did really well for a while. One of the first videos that actually took off on my channel and was for a period of time, probably a year, was like just driving my channel. I made a video called Episcopal versus Anglican. Which makes people think, because they're like, well, Episcopalians are Anglicans, right? So that video, and it was actually a cut from a longer video on a different topic, and that one did really well for a while. So it's somewhat predictable. Often I'll tell my wife, I'm like, this video is going to do well. This video, I said, like, it's not going to do super well, but that's okay. I know what I'm going for, and most of the time I'm correct on that. I can tell which videos will do better. And I'm fine with making ones that don't do better, because my goal is more than just getting as many clicks as possible. It's, getting the information out there about the big groups, but also the small ones.
Right. And then the average length of your videos are like, give or take, an hour. I mean,
sure. I try to avoid an hour at this point. So I think most of them are probably going to be between 15 minutes to 35 minutes or something like that. I made a video a while back on the Salvation Army, and that video was over an hour long. And I just remember like recording it, and it's like, oh, this is such a slog. Like with my stuff, like there's so many graphics to make. And just sitting down and recording for an hour long is not a lot of fun either, especially when you're just reading off a script. And I was like, I need to stop this. And nobody's going to want to watch this video. It's just too long. And so I kind of committed at that point. All right, I'm going to start, as opposed to always just reading off full quotes, I'm going to try to put the quote on the screen and highlight parts and stuff. So I've tried to cut things back. But some videos, if I have a topic that's really very in depth, and, if it takes an hour to do it, I'll do it in an hour. But I do try to avoid being too long. And I have some videos that are pretty quick too. I had a series on Christian denominations in 2 minutes. I believe there's 60 videos in that series. I released them 3 at a time. And so those are just 2 minutes for each video.
Got it. And then you mentioned something earlier on about presenting things from a neutral point of view. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you, and is that a vision you had originally? Is it something you kind of decided when you kind of more along the way?
Well, when I was initially asked to teach a class on Christian denominations, I knew at least the starting point needs to be neutral to some extent. Like I at least fair. I need to talk about denominations and say, here's what they actually believe. And, when I'm making that video and researching it, what am I looking for? I'm looking for neutral information. So it's like, there is a value in neutrality to be able to find something you can trust. And then even if later on I want to build on it and say, now here's where these groups need to be corrected or something like that, I have to start by something I can trust that this is what they actually say. And so when I made those videos, I went to the source and looked at what those denominations themselves said. But then I realized, and I'd actually realized before this, that there's just not that much on YouTube about Christian denominations, and certainly not from a neutral perspective. A couple of years ago, I made a video called "Neutral Point of View is Wrong," which is a catchy title, and that one did do well. And what I say in that video is that neutral point of view can only answer certain questions. Like if you're talking about a war and 2 sides are fighting over it, you can describe why they're fighting, but you can't describe who's right, because then you're no longer neutral. You've now taken a side. So maybe the most important question, who is right, is actually left out of neutral point of view. So in that sense, if you're leaving off that, then you could say, in some sense, neutral point of view is wrong. Now, ultimately, I would say at the end of the video is, I choose to make this channel from neutral point of view anyway, but I recognize that no person should be neutral. Like in your life, you do have to make conclusions on these things. But there's a value in us being able to come together and agree on the parameters of the debate before we start. If we're going to argue about entire sanctification, for example, I should be able to explain it, and you should be able to explain it. We should be able to agree what it is. And then we can say, all right, now here's why I think it's wrong, or here's why I think it's right. And too many times people are trying to say, you believe this. And the other person says, no, I don't believe that. And then you spend the whole time arguing, trying to tell them what they believe.
Right.
It's like, well, let's start by, okay, what do you believe? All right. I think we've got that cleared. Now we can argue why I think it's right or wrong, instead of just continuing being wrapped around that question of what they actually believe.
And so some of the alternative perspectives would it be like a persuasive point of view?
Sure.
That would be the sort of an alternative way to make a video on.
Yeah, absolutely. And the existence and the fact that I make my channel from neutral point of view is no slam on anybody doing anything differently, or even saying that I won't necessarily at some point in the future make a channel that it's far more traditional to just make a channel that you're yourself, and really by being neutral point of view, I'm not myself on my channel in that way, right? Most people don't know very much about me, and I consider that fine.
That's good.
Because my channel is not really in any way about me. And I've only said in maybe 2 or 3 of my videos, I've even given my name, Joshua. I don't even, for YouTube channels, they always say, you want people to get to know you, introduce yourself at every video and things like that. And I could do that and still obviously be neutral, but my thought is like, I'm the narrator. In fact, I've had people comment before, like, I don't remember if they use the word narrator or something like that, but you can tell like I'm just working for Ready to Harvest and just the guy that reads stuff off or whatever. But yeah, I do the whole thing, but it's not really about me. It's about the content that I'm making, it about the groups that I'm discussing.
Great. And then I know, what was the title of the talk you gave to
so we were talking about the content creation can be a good thing. The idea of being on YouTube and using it in the right way.
And what were some of the points you were trying to make in the talks for the people who don't get a chance to listen?
Well, there's so much on YouTube that what I see a lot for Christian content creators on YouTube is they end up getting caught up in the whole like trying to get the most clicks and things like that. And what that ends up doing is you're not really the person making the content at that point. You're letting whatever is clickable, whatever the audience wants, or whatever will make them click, even if they want it or not, whatever will get them stirred up, be the thing that drives your channel. And so for me, I've said, I'm just going to make things that I think are important, and some of them will do well and some of them won't. So that's one of the dangers. Of course, there's another thing if a person decides to make content on YouTube is you have to watch out about like the pride factor. People can get proud. I mean, and that's only a danger if your channel gets big. A lot of people kind of like, they wish they could have the opportunity to do that because a lot of people think, oh, I can't be that hard. And honestly, like I'm sure there's a lot, you could call it luck or whatever. There's a lot of things that went into my channel that I wasn't entirely in control of. There's the algorithm, and all those things. But if a person does happen to do well, then it's like, just because you have a lot of people listening to you doesn't mean you're any worth hearing. Doesn't mean your opinion is any more valuable than anybody else's. So you have to watch out for those kind of things. It's easy. I actually, for a good while when I got started, it's so easy to just be caught up in statistics. Like I'm a statistically minded guy. I have some videos on my channel about it. And I could just be obsessing about like, okay, how did I do today compared to last? And YouTube makes that way too easy. There's like all this complex stuff. Here's all the videos you released in the past year, and here's how they compared. Here's what they did in the first 24 hours. Here's the click-through rates. Here's the average view duration. You can get really just buried in that. And I've finally learned to kind of move past that somewhat, and I can just not look at any of those analytics for weeks, and I'll be fine. But a person can just kind of let that control them. One thing that I think is a pitfall that I talked about, but that doesn't have to be, and I've avoided it. People talk a lot about burnout on YouTube, about, you finish making a video and then the very next thing is, I must make another one. Like, everybody's expecting it. I've got to keep, especially if you have a schedule set for yourself, like there's no rest. And for me, I work ahead of time. So I make a video and I schedule it to release at some point in the future, and I work until I have a big backlog. So I actually have a couple months of content that's all ready. And if I get, this is happy. Like if I get sick and I'm laying in bed, like I'm not both sick and also stressing about like, oh, I gotta like pull an all-nighter on Saturday night or something to get a video ready. I think that's terrible for like mental health to do that. And this is probably one of the reasons that people burn out. I enjoy going home, being with the family, going on the bike ride with my kids. And I've found a good way to have those separate domains of things. Like when I'm with my kids, I'm not thinking about my YouTube channel. When I'm doing my other work that I do, I'm not thinking about my YouTube channel. I have those times, and then when I do one and leave that, I switch on to the other thing and I can work on that. And that's a luxury only afforded by the fact that I actually have prepared ahead of time. And so it's not like, well, this has to be done tomorrow or it's all over. So I do think it's good to make sure that you're not always focused on content creation or something like that.
Right. And do you have any advice on YouTube consumption versus creation, on like key guiding principles for people to think about where they're consuming their media? Because I think it's a really common thing that I hear among people in my church, people in school, is they go onto YouTube to do something at night. Let's just say for a homework assignment, it's 2 hours later, and they believe just burned 2 hours. And whatever the algorithm put in front of them. Do you have any guiding principles on how to use YouTube in I said maybe a healthy way?
Sure.
Avoiding maybe some of the stuff on there that probably isn't worth people's time.
Yeah, you have to be, one of the things to be mindful of is realize what these media platforms, what their motivations are. Right. And people have mentioned like, well, if you go to the YouTube search and say you just type Christian denominations, like the first 3 results will be relevant. And then after that, it's just looking at your homepage. It's a bunch of suggested content and things like that. Why would YouTube do that when they know you're looking for content on Christian denominations? And the reason is the motivation behind YouTube is not necessarily to provide what you're looking for. If providing what you're looking for makes you stay long on YouTube, then they'll provide what you're looking for. But their motivation is keep you on the site as long as possible. And so they've found, and the testimony of the people who end up spending 2 hours on there, if they just found what they were looking for, they'd be through there and out in 15, 20 minutes, right? But YouTube knows if they recommend all this other stuff, that you'll stay longer. And that's their goal. Longer staying on the site is more ad revenue and so forth, meets all their goals. So if you're aware of that, then you can think of ways to counter that. And especially now with things like YouTube Shorts is a really easy way to burn up time. People are flipping through these quick, fast videos. With those, I think, you see one, you think, oh, that was funny, that was interesting. If you, let's say you spent 1 minute on a short, which is really the longest they can be, and you did that for an hour, that means you watched 60 pieces of content. I would bet, though, if you talked to a person after they finished that hour and you said, okay, tell me how many of those you can remember, like how many of them can you actually call out? They would find, like, even the one they watched 3 minutes ago that was funny and interesting, they can't remember it because it's not something that's lasting. It's just that very fast, short-term waste of time. And I think that's what we have to ultimately decide is like, what kind of things are waste of time and what will I consciously decide not to do? Or at least find some way to limit it. I mean, at the extreme, you can get web browser extensions and things that will give you time limits. After 30 minutes on YouTube, it cuts you off, and that's all the YouTube for today. Even if they're easy to bypass, often that's good enough. Like it cuts it, like you could do it, but you set this up, and so you can get around it if you want to. But you say, oh, that's good. That's a reminder. I'm going to stop this. But if a person can be even more mindful, then they should have a goal going into social media. Why am I going in here instead of this thing where it's just like click on the icon and just what is it going to feed me today?
Well, it's become sort of like turning on the TV. I mean, I don't not to speak poorly about people with TVs in there, but it's like I'm going to turn this on just to burn time. And
YouTube has been one in the past to some extent a way to be different than that, in that you're the person choosing what you're watching as opposed to the TV where it's like whatever's on, I'll just watch. But that is what has changed with things like Shorts and TikTok. They directly feed you something that you never asked for at all, and then you can decide to flip away, but then you just get presented with something else that you never asked for. So I do think that there's a definite parallel there, and obviously not all that surprising that YouTube is actually in the TV business now too, as well. So yeah, there can be some similarities there. I mean, obviously television was the time waster of the last half century at least, and now in the last 20 years, the internet has kind of come to replace it or just add on to it as another time waster. Certainly there's a lot of value that can be provided by the internet, but as any powerful tool is, it's going to be used by people with all different motivations.
Right. And then this is just like a quick question. You don't have to have the right answer. Sometimes when we're a Christian college and we have to do marketing because we're looking for people.
Sure.
Do you feel like are there any ethical concerns about using a platform like YouTube that has a ton of other questionable content out there to mix in your content into that algorithm? Are there any ethical concerns that we should be thinking about? It's just like even any businesses trying to use the platform for probably good motivations. And or are there any like helpful principles that you've thought about to sort of work your way around that?
Yeah, you think about there's people so to kind of use an analogy, there's people who say, well, we shouldn't use palm oil, and so then they use a different kind of oil, and then somebody says, well, that oil is actually doing this, and you can essentially find an ethical problem anywhere if you look hard enough. So the question is balancing like how far are you willing to go? I mean, at obviously just the most base level, if you're actually paying for advertisement on YouTube, then you're putting money in the pockets of YouTube, in the pockets of Google, and I'm sure we can find things that those companies have donated to that we disagree with. So the question is, can you use their services? But of course, by even watching the videos, you're supporting that ad revenue stream. And so, at the end, ultimately, you could try to make, and some people would make the argument, you can just go all the way and ultimately say you have to stay off the internet altogether. Obviously, I've not come to that conclusion. But so if you don't take everything to its extreme, you do have the question, okay, is my ad going to be placed in front of things? There are ways you can limit ad placement on YouTube. Like you can block certain channels, like my ads will not play there. But let's say not advertising, just posting as a channel, and maybe they're ads, but they're not playing in front of something else. Well, would you be willing to put up a billboard, in your local town?
Yeah.
And you guess what? What might be on the other side of the billboard, and what are the other billboards in town?
Control it.
Yeah. YouTube is, I still in a lot of ways, kind of a public forum where everybody is talking. And by choosing not to talk there, you're not lessening anybody else's voice. You're only lowering your own. By talking, you're not approving anybody else's voice either. You're simply making your own heard. So I do think there's an argument to be said that there's a value in speaking on platforms, even where people have all kinds of things that they say. I think there can also be the case to be made where, there are probably platforms that'd be better for us to stay away from, just like there are places we'd stay away from. And also, if alternatives come along in the future that we say these are better, then maybe it's time to be willing to jump ship and not get so committed to one group.
Well, I just wanted to affirm that I'm in the camp that there's an opportunity here to leverage the platform, and I've heard so many people that I bump into consume sort of just sermons from sermons on YouTube, which is a huge tool to be able to be feeding ourselves really fun.
There's a massive number there. There's so many churches today that stream all of their content onto YouTube.
And so even your videos, I've learned a lot from them. And so I just wanted to thank you for a lot of the work you put in there.
Praise the Lord.
And one of the things that the other questions I was going to get at is, this is changing topics a little bit.
Sure.
Do you know how many denominations, give or take, in Christianity exist today?
Yeah, so I have a video on my channel called, Are There Really 45,000 Christian Denominations? Because there was the World Christian Encyclopedia published that number a while back, and that number, which at this point it's been something that grows each year. So there's people who've said 35,000, 45,000, 65,000, et cetera, et cetera. But that number came from taking essentially every denominational group, and if they're in multiple countries, then each country is also considered a separate denomination. And so I think that number is a bit inflated. Ultimately, there does become the question of what is a denomination, because there's a lot of churches that kind of are one-off. They're just like one church. Are they their own denomination? Exactly. Like is each separate movement a denomination? And even if there are a lot, when does it really start to matter? Like, a denomination of two churches over there, okay, but like, should we really count that as another option in the whole denominational sphere? So if you look at the 2020 U.S. religion census, they basically had anything I would consider notable for United States denominations. And as I recall, their spreadsheet that gives like the count of congregations and adherents is maybe 400 or so that would be like notable in the U.S. There are going to be some other groups that are smaller than that. But if you're just going to count everybody and count every place across the world and stuff, it's an uncountable number for sure. I mean, like it exists. The number exists, and God knows what it is. But there's not some central place where they're all reporting to that we could get it.
And I guess my follow-up question: should we? This is a hard question. Should we be burdened by the growing number of denominations, or is this something that some of us should be thinking about? Hey, how do we prevent this growing number, or is it okay and natural? That's sort of the context of Christianity.
Each group has a different take on that idea, because in some Christian denominations, the very idea of schism or separating up, breaking apart is viewed extremely negative, and others it's almost a regular occurrence. So if you look at, for example, Presbyterians, hardly a year goes by without another Presbyterian denomination forming, and so if your denomination was formed by splitting off, there's inherently some acceptance that there can be a right time for that. Like, if the group that you're a part of went liberal, and you are still conservative and you don't want to fellowship with them, then you break away. And that's what they've decided to do. So, I don't know if I can neutrally answer that question, but certainly some groups would say, no, like you're always, if a group views themselves as requiring a necessity of apostolic succession, then if you don't at least take a bishop with you, then there's a serious problem, right, in their view. But there is the question, I think, that often comes up in those discussions is, well, isn't isn't it somewhat problematic when you look at Christianity and nobody can agree on everything? Is there a problem? Is there something wrong with Christianity that the Christians can't get along? More recently, I've seen some kind of apologetic in the opposite direction where people say, well, actually, the abundance of Christian denominations is a good thing. It means people at least care about theology as opposed to just like, let's all just be together and in the same church when we all disagree on certain issues. I think ultimately what it points to is people can justify their beliefs regardless. Like you can find a way to make the Bible say what you want in one way or the other. And of course, everybody's going to have to do their own research to see which people are doing so rightfully and which people are trying to twist the scriptures to match what they say. But I don't think that the massive Christian denominations disproves Christianity. I think it's actually consistent with Christianity in that Christianity doesn't claim people are perfect or going to follow the truth. In fact, just at the time that Christ was around and his apostles in the New Testament, you already hear about people who are leaving the right path and teaching their own doctrines of men. So it was immediately recognized that there was going to be false prophets, false Christs, and such. So the abundance of Christian denominations is something that you could almost say was inevitable, and shouldn't be used I don't think, ultimately by itself as some kind of disproof of the truth of the Christian message.
Right. I think it's an interesting question because sort of in my mid-20s is when I started thinking it was important to pay attention to differences across churches, because I think you said it way early on. Eventually, we're going to have to make decisions for ourselves about what we believe.
Yeah.
And with like church splits going on about key issues, it's hard for me to know what advice to give always about, even when people are in a congregation that's going through some sort of disagreement. Do you stay? Do you go? Is the growing number of denominations okay? Do you have any advice to give to people in sort of wrestling with? I think if they aren't a member of a denomination, don't feel at home, or a little bit nomadic, how do they go about making decisions? If a church is going through a hard time, what's sort of some of the guiding principles on when to rally behind the schism versus not? It is a hard group of questions.
Yes, they are some of the more difficult questions in the field of denomination. I'll try to do my best to remember some of the things that you've said there, but I mean, there's quite a bit of a difference between like a local congregation splitting and a whole denomination splitting. Let's take the congregational aspect of things. I think there's, depending on the polity of a denomination, these things may be viewed differently. But within a congregation that's dividing, I think most people recognize, at least they would say, that the church is the people, right? And so ultimately, if this church has been founded on a certain set of principles, if you're the one who's different, I think it's generally a little dishonest to try to change that group to try to become like you. Right. Like they formed under this understanding of Christianity. Hey, if you don't like that, go start something else, or go find somebody else who does it, as opposed to trying to twist them into that. That becomes problematic because occasionally it will happen where somebody will come along and be a minister at a church who tries to change that church. And then ultimately, instead of following that advice, where if they would follow my position to decide to leave because they're different, now they're forcing everybody else who's comfortable in this church teaching their theology to leave instead. And that's where it becomes much more difficult. If the polity structure doesn't allow it, there's really just not much way as far as to fight. Like if in the end the authority comes down to a board within the church, then if there's no way that you can find things being reconciled, I'd say cut your losses. Personal relationships probably aren't worth ruining to just fight and ultimately lose the battle anyway, and go find someplace where you can serve God. There's so much damage that happens in church and denomination splits individually. There's so many people who have been hurt from those kind of things and just either pushed out of Christianity altogether or really got a sour taste about a denomination that otherwise they don't disagree with per se, but just the events that happened in it have really messed them up. And I see a lot of hurt people like that in the comment sections of my videos. So I think trying to avoid some of that fighting is a lot of times a good thing. But on the denominational level, there's somewhat of a controversy over should you stay and fight or should you decide, okay, no, like the Bible tells us to not have fellowship with unbelievers, and I can tell that there's like a whole bunch of unbelievers who are kind of running the show here. Am I going to stay for 20 years putting up a fight or get out of this group and do something different? And that can be a much more difficult question, especially with people who, grandpa was in this church, mom is they're buried behind the church
in the blood.
Yeah, and we've been here forever. Then there's a lot of personal questions that come into the whole question. But you do have to take a biblical look at does the Bible have things to say about those issues, and a lot of times the question ultimately comes down to biblically can I follow what the Bible says while remaining in fellowship with the group of people who will promote and even use church finances to push things that are completely opposite to what I believe. I think that's when it gets to the breaking point and denominations are splitting, is when they say I no longer feel like I can fellowship with you because our paths are so different that church unity between us is no longer possible. And there's just not a lot of good examples of where those kind of things get reconciled easily. And if the two of you can be faithful in your local churches without the ecclesiastical joining between those two churches, then go be faithful in those churches and don't have, spend the next 10 years of your life fighting church politics as opposed to, promoting the kingdom of God.
That's a good answer. And are there any other things that you want to talk about before? I know our viewership, usually people make it to like the half hour, 45 minutes.
Sure.
So
so this is for the people who are left.
Yeah, for the people who are
interesting
about any other deep passions that we didn't touch on.
Well, I used to make origami. I used to do that quite a bit, so I could throw that out there. Christian Denominations has kind of eclipsed that. For a period of time while I was in college, I actually worked in a call center, and while I was taking calls, I would fold origami stuff, and I still have some of my old creations. So for those of you who stuck around that wanted to learn something,
I feel like that actually sort of connects to attention to detail into research.
Could be.
Yeah, maybe that was like they're interconnected.
Maybe that was building me in a certain way, preparing me for the future. I didn't know it.
And what's the easiest way to support your work? For anyone listening, including myself.
Yeah, so if a person is, I wouldn't ask anybody to support the channel who hasn't spent a good deal of time taking a look at it and saying that they really support the vision of the idea. My website is readytoharvest.com, and that's basically acts like a Patreon page, so anybody can just sign up and make a small monthly donation. And I recognize like a person who does that, it's because they really like this stuff. So it's not like they're coming to try to buy something from me every time. But I do have there on my website the transcripts of the videos with all the footnotes. So all the research that I did going to the websites and statements of faith are linked, and a person can click through and do their own research in even more detail if they would like. And the videos are ad-free there, which, by the way, if you find yourself getting caught up in YouTube and, you wanted to just learn about denominations and now you're off watching silly cat videos or something, if you go to my website, you can watch the videos there and you won't get pulled by anything else. No recommendations, no ads. So that's maybe a little benefit for people who support the channel.
Right, that's great. And I just wanted to give you a shout out that somebody sent me one of your videos, and my background, my last name is Johnson, my wife's last name is Stoltzfus. And so even in my marriage, there was a lot of we just generational differences across beliefs. And I watched your video, and I was like, this guy, somehow he understands all these things that I've been trying to figure out over the last 5 years. And I think it was really, really helpful to see somebody put together a framework of comparison. And I'm just really excited about your work. And I'm also excited that it gives people a way to think about truth. And there's one of my favorite quotes is, truth is unkillable. And I think that at the end of the day, all your videos sort of will contribute to that.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. When it got started, there weren't a lot of people watching. And so I was always thinking about the potential viewer in the future and what I would hope they would walk away with when they watch the videos. And, as the channel has grown, I see a lot of that feedback very quickly. But still, a lot of times, I'll hear, from somebody else. Most people don't comment, most people don't interact, but I'll find out, there's people watching somewhere else, and it's really neat to hear that from you and from other people that I've heard about it here at Sadler.